and welcome to Unmanned Uncovered. I'm your host, Ryan Shaffer, Global Marketing Manager at Consortiq. On today's episode, we have Guillaume Delépine, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Skydio. If you haven't heard it by now, Skydio's got a few new updates, including the Skydio X2 and the Skydio Cloud, and we're going to tell you all about it coming up. It's good to have you on the show today, Guillaume.
Thanks for having me.
So you have quite a path to the land of drones, and that's from Princeton to Harvard to Skydio. What inspired that transition?
Yeah, it's certainly not the most straightforward path I could have taken. I think a lot of people are joining Skydio in more direct ways nowadays. But back then, like you said, I did my undergrad at Princeton. Always been interested in the intersection of technology and policy and the ways that technology businesses can help with some really serious social issues. And I took that interest all the way through to ending up in the joint degree program where I was going after a master's in public policy and an MBA at Harvard, and this really great 3-year program that they've got there. And while I was there, I had that founder itch. I wanted to start a company, and this beautiful thing happened where Skydio was coming out with an SDK, and that SDK ended up not being something that we pursued, but I tried to start a company on it. And when I started to work with Skydio, we just kind of realized that we had a lot of common thinking about a lot of these use cases, how important these drones are going to be for first responders, how important they're going to be for inspection, and keeping all of these use cases a lot safer. And the ways that Skydio's autonomy really changes the economics for customers gave me a lot of confidence. And so I ended up spending what I thought would be a summer internship at Skydio. And the more I learned, the more I realized I just really wanted to be a part of this. And so either I'm totally crazy or there's something great to believe in, but I took a long leave of absence from the program and I haven't looked back. It's been amazing. And I started off as our public safety lead, started building out our team selling to first responders and supporting firefighters and police officers doing search and rescue missions and de-escalation of hostile scenes, and then worked with our executive team as enterprise strategy manager to help us kind of design what it would look like to pivot from the consumer company that we were before our Series C fundraise a couple of years ago around the launch of Skydio 2 into the fully fledged enterprise company that you see today, where we serve still the consumer market, but also the federal, state, and local government and kind of large enterprise type customers. Planning all that out, figuring out how we would need to fundraise and hire and tell our own story. And once we had all that set, I've had a lot of fun in product marketing. I am the product marketing manager for enterprise. I like to focus on a lot of work with our construction customers, our inspectors, our teams that are doing all kinds of missions for sometimes subcontracting for the government, but really private companies that are doing these work. And that ranges from your small drone service provider all the way up to some of the largest engineering and construction companies on the planet. So I just couldn't have any more fun in my life. And right now, especially with 3D Scan, which we've been teasing and are really excited to say a little bit more about on this show, it's really hard to imagine anywhere that could be more fun than Skydio to be right now.
So we're both in marketing. I think you'll be able to answer this pretty well. I'm getting my Skydio 2 here in a couple of weeks. I was really excited about the idea of the autonomy. Nice. What should I expect, as a marketing professional and also someone who's in the commercial space who can use it as a professional remote pilot interested in commercial applications?
Oh, Brian, you're going to have so much fun. It's a flying experience that really is unlike any other drone out there, right? So those of us who've flown all the manual drones out there, we're just not used to having a supercomputer as our co-pilot, right? You've got an NVIDIA Tegra TX2 on there that's doing 100 million computations per second. And that means that you can go and have all the fun without a lot of the risk, right? It's freedom to fly near obstacles because you've got 360-degree obstacle avoidance. It's freedom to fly under bridges because it doesn't matter if you lose GPS. These drones can navigate themselves with their pure vision system. It's freedom to fly near metal because they're not dependent on magnetometers the way that other drones are. And when you get into all those environments, you got all the horsepower you need to generate some really cool content and video, right? Whether it's as a marketer or if you're trying to generate a really good inspection content, you've got a 12 megapixel color camera that shoots in 4K 60 and is tuned really, really well. We've got some materials coming out soon to show this camera really outkicks its coverage and competes with some of the much more expensive sensors out there when you look at the photo outputs, right? And so guys like you and me, we've spent a lot of time piloting and flying these drones, but not everyone has, right? And so outside of a handful of pros who can really get the most out of their manual drones because they've got hundreds of hours of stick time or anything like that, with Skydio 2, you're going to be able to go out and plan autonomous flights in your first 5 minutes with the drone and generate shots that would take a lot of practice and a lot of takes and a lot of tries and probably a couple crashes to get done with any other drone. I'm excited for you, man. You're going to shoot the best looking, the coolest videos of your life. And when you're out there doing the enterprise jobs, they're going to be easier, faster, and you're going to love the data outputs you get.
You talk about crashing drones. First drone I ever had, Paradanafi. I crashed it in 5 minutes in front of my son. My heart sank with the $1,000 loss of a drone. It's a little scary, so that's good to hear. I have a Mavic 2 Pro now, so I'm excited to compare, but the autonomy, it's exciting. Really curious to see how I can use that to my advantage. And for all of the things you just said, it makes it even more exciting. Speaking of exciting, which package would you choose? Which package would you be most excited to get? What would be most useful to a marketer / commercial pilot?
Oh, well, I think it depends who you are. And you got to remember these packages are designed for different kinds of users. If I were getting something to go out on the weekends with, I love the cinema kit. Once you've got that hard shell case, you've got all your materials in there and organized, and they're there for you every time. It's so easy to travel with. It fits in a carry-on. We fly around the country with them and really enjoy having those cinema kits. If I were trying to build a business around Skydio, I got to go for the Pro Kit, right? The Pro Kit gives you a few more accessories, also gives you Skydio Premier support, which means you go to the front of the line for customer support questions because you're out there doing your job and trying to get through the day. And so Skydio will have your back in a lot more ways when you go with the Pro Kit. And then I also would recommend, for those enterprise users, is to work with Skydio sales teams and get a sense of the Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation software package. Because for those of us who like to really push our drones to the limit, well, we've gone in and done further software development, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, hopefully in the podcast, right? But the Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation package lets that drone do even more while you're at the sticks and controlling it, right? Whether you're using super zoom to look in every direction or using the reduced obstacle margin settings to be able to fly even closer to the structures that Skydio is normally going to avoid for you. The sky's no limit, right? When it comes to Skydio, and picking your package is really a question of who you are and what you're going to be using it for. And we've designed all these packages to make sure that there's something valuable for you in our offerings.
All right. So we've talked a lot about the Skydio 2. It's been out for 2 years. I wouldn't say it's old news, but you've got even bigger news. The Skydio X2, you have 2 versions of it, and you have the Skydio Cloud just released. How long has that been in development, and what are you as a company most excited to showcase?
Oh, the X2, that thing is amazing. We're all competing to get to fly them internally. And every time you do, it feels like you discover something new about that drone that is just incredible. It's been in development, to answer your question, for about 18 months as part of the U.S. Department of Defense's Short Range Reconnaissance Program. This was a program that took about 30 different drone manufacturers and just had them compete to say who can build the best aircraft for that short range reconnaissance, right? Being able to look over the next hill or take in a scene, do some after action photography, things like that. And the Army compared the X2 against all of these other vehicles, and we're happy to announce that Skydio has been selected for the final integration as we released a few weeks ago. It's insanely cool as a drone. You take all of the genius, all the brains that are in that Skydio 2, right? And you put it in a really athletic body. It's like if you were to combine Albert Einstein and Bruce Lee, you'd get some like super genius, awesome fighter. And, we're excited for people to see that. The X2, it folds. It's got 35-minute battery life, up to 10 clicks of range, depending on the package. And you can carry either dual color and thermal camera, or as we just announced, just a straight up color camera to, match all those daytime use cases where you don't necessarily need that FLIR sensor. And what we're also really excited about is our supply chain, right? So it starts with picking the best materials on the planet. Some, for example, really advanced carbon fiber that you'll see on the top of it if you look at any pictures of the X2, but also that our supply chain is fully NDAA compliant, which means that all of the parts have been vetted extensively for cybersecurity. All of these factors contribute to the Army picking X2 for the final integration. The testing is intense, right? It's multiple testing events where, we're down there for weeks at a time flying going through all the motions. And for the Army to choose us after that extensive testing is something that makes us really proud and honored to be able to serve our country that way, but also really excited that we just built a great product. The team did an amazing job here, and we can't wait to see how it helps people, both in and out of the armed forces.
Get the data that's most important to you and your organization with unmanned data services from Consortiq. From utility inspections to construction project surveys, our remote pilots will utilize the latest drone technology to give you the most precise and accurate information safely, quickly, and within your budget. Let us do the work for you. Schedule a consultation now at consortiq.com.
You touched upon some of the use cases earlier, such as 3D scan, which I'd really love to hear more about, as Consortiq works on 3D scans as well. What are some of the use cases that make this system unique as an industrial grade platform?
The magic with any Skydio is in the way that it flies. What I like to tell people is you can take a Honda Civic, right? And you can bolt on a backup camera, and you can throw a subwoofer in the trunk, and you can put on a new suspension and new tires. And don't get me wrong, I love Honda Civics, and especially the tuned up ones. But I'd rather drive a Mercedes, right? I'd rather drive a Cadillac, right? And what I know with the Cadillac is the Cadillac's going to drive better. It's going to drive longer. It's going to drive smoother. It's going to have all kinds of features to keep me safe out there. And you can see the same thing in the drone industry. It's not unique anymore to carry a thermal camera or to build a drone that folds. One thing that frustrated us and motivated us at Skydio is that all the manual drone vendors are playing that game. They're coming out with a slightly better camera, a little bit more wireless range, a slightly smaller airframe every year. And all of these incremental improvements are great, but they don't change the way that operators use the drones. They might make it a little bit faster around the edges, or, let the photos be a little bit clearer. But Skydio drones are all about scale. You can be confident putting them into these tough environments, right? Which means that there are more use cases available to you when you fly a Skydio. And we've got customers. Aeronide in the southeast of the US is a great example of a customer who opened up new service lines, right? Now they're able to do indoor jobs with their drones in big warehouses and manufacturing facilities, because they know that they can fly these drones indoors, right? Accurate Drone Solutions is a customer in the Pacific Northwest who is able to fly on construction sites and PT decks. Because of the autonomy, they don't have to shut down the whole site to be able to get a flight in and build an as-built assessment. They're able to do that as things are still there, right? They don't need to take the crane out of the way to be able to fly over the PT deck. And so you can see how autonomy is making these real differences that save people time and money and risk. That's what really makes it unique, right? So whether you're doing ISR, right, you're in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance for the military, right, or you're a first responder trying to get situational awareness, or you're an enterprise company doing inspection and mapping, these platforms are so versatile and not only make existing use cases, better, faster, and safer, like we talked about, but they open up entirely new ones. And that's what we're so excited for, especially with the creativity of the pilots out there.
Clearly, you're focusing on the unmanned portion of UAS. With that said, do you believe that in 5 years that remote pilots will no longer be a thing and it's all going to be about autonomy?
Absolutely not. I cannot be clearer on this point. Skydio is not at all about getting rid of pilots. And in fact, you said unmanned. We like to say uncrewed at Skydio. Number one, it's a more inclusive term. And that's a really important thing, right? It's not about the politics. It's we need to bring in as many people as we possibly can into the drone industry in the next decade. There was a great article by Danielle Gagne from the Commercial UAV News that talked about how we are tremendously short on pilots for the amount of drone work that is out there and needs to get done, right? You look at the US, right? We've got about 200,000 FAA Part 107 pilots. You compare that against 614,000 bridges, 4 million miles of road, 140,000 miles of railroad, 150,000 cell towers, 200,000 miles of transmission lines. These are all the numbers that I dream about. And, we're using drones to inspect some of that, but if drones are going to become the best way to perform these jobs at scale, we're going to need way, way, way more drone pilots, because it doesn't matter how good a drone pilot you are. You can't do 614,000 bridges in a year, and 200,000 drone pilots are not going to come close to covering all those assets that I just mentioned. And so where we get excited about autonomy is not at all about getting rid of drone pilots. It's about making it easier to become a drone pilot and easier to get a great job done with a drone pilot. And you can see that in the way that our customers are using it. You look at what autonomy does. If I just think about a few of our customers here, we've talked to Sunt Construction, we've talked to Japan Infrastructure Waymark, where there's a case study available on Skydio.com. JIW is a bridge inspection outfit in Japan. They cut their training hours required before they'll let somebody go inspect a bridge from 100 down to 8 when they found Skydio. Accurate Drone Solutions realized that they can get jobs done 37% faster to be able to get onto a scene, get out of the scene, be able to do more jobs in the month. They're making more money because they have Skydios. So autonomy is going to make it easier and more profitable to build these drone programs. And when it's easier and more profitable to hire a drone pilot, industries are going to hire more drone pilots. And so manual drones today are niche. You look at the amount of infrastructure that's out there, there's so much white space for us. And all the expert pilots today, they're not going anywhere. You think about tomorrow's drone pilots, right? The next 80% of drone pilots that we got to bring on in the next decade, those guys and gals may have never even heard of drones today, right? And autonomy is going to lower the barrier of entry so that they can join the industry and start making an impact. And I'll tell you what, if you're an expert drone pilot today and you're running a drone program, you're in an amazing position to grow in your organization and go from a pilot to a manager and help us bring this new generation of pilots on board.
Well, it seems to me that the next logical step with autonomous UAS is self-charging. Is that something that we can expect to see relatively soon or in the coming years?
You must be asking about the Skydio Dock. Yes, we have demonstrated dock operations so far as a proof of concept, and we've continued to develop that technology. But there are a couple of things that you need before you can really get into that self-charging. Before you start talking about these drones launching and landing on their chargers, you need the drones to be able to do useful things by themselves during the actual flight. Manual drones, by and large, haven't reached that stage yet. And that's why you don't see kind of widespread adoption of these drone technologies where you've got docked drones. Is in between the launch and land, you're still really limited in what you can get done when you're remote operating, right? It takes these large crews to make sure that the drones are safe and that you're not going to crash them. And think about it, right? If you're flying through that FPV view, which is all you get because you've got no line of sight when you're flying some docked drone that you're remotely operating, you can't fly a manual drone sideways, up, down, or backwards. You can only fly the way you're facing. And that's an extremely limiting way to fly if you're trying to get a real enterprise job done. So we think that autonomy is kind of a first step. And we're really excited about working with our customers to get them kind of working with the first stages of autonomy, where they start by having a human in the loop. Then that human is on the loop, where you're throwing the drone into an autonomous tracking workflow, right? Or into an autonomous scanning workflow, as we'll talk about with 3D scan. And then once we've got that base autonomy, then we can start going to docks. And the one other thing I'll say about that is that these dock drones are much more than just a hardware problem, right? It's not just about building the charger and the battery. That's actually the easy part. The harder part is making sure that these program managers and operators are able to manage multiple locations and missions. And so a few weeks ago, we announced Skydio Cloud, where some features are moving into early access with select customers and some features are kind of still further out on the roadmap. But our Skydio fleet management, our Skydio automatic media sync, those streamlined data workflows have recently opened to early access. We're excited to start using those with customers, ironing out the kinks, getting them ready for general availability. And those are going to be really critical enabling factors for a couple other pieces of software that we announced, which are streaming from these docked drones and then getting into the remote operations. But what you can expect to see from Skydio is a couple things. One is we're going to address this problem like the software company that we are and not like the hardware companies that we compete with. And what that's going to mean for our customers and your listeners on this podcast is you can expect that if you start to work with Skydio today with an eye on docks, we're going to help you get there. Our entire roadmap is built incrementally, right? Of adding these features where first you've got the assisted flight, then you've got those autonomous missions like we talked about. Then we can add some media sync and management. Then we can add streaming and some teleoperation. Then we can get you in docks. Then we can get you in connected services. The arc of autonomy, as we talk about, and as our CEO, Adam Bree, mentioned at the last AUVSI keynote he gave, is something that we think about a lot, is how can we bring our customers and by and large the entire industry from this kind of age of manual drones into that age of autonomy. We're so excited to work with everyone to get there.
You mentioned 3D scans a couple of times. I think we just have to get into it now. At Consortiq, we train companies to do this. We do it for them. And we also do consultation as to which drone they should be using. Why use Skydio for your 3D scans?
Oh, Ryan, you got to get some 3D scan action at Consortiq. You're going to love this thing. It's I'm so excited about it. When we show it to customers, I mean, we bring a mop to get people's jaws up off the floor. It's so magical to see when the way that these inspection missions happen today. Maybe people aren't even using drones, right? That's everybody on this podcast's nightmare. You've got people in snooper trucks. You've got people rappelling on ropes down from bridges, just trying to look at stuff to keep it safe, right? Meanwhile, they're in a ton of danger. They're causing traffic jams. They're only seeing a few angles of whatever they're looking at. With a drone, you can do a lot better. Everybody on this podcast or listening to this podcast probably agrees. But these manual drones have all kinds of limitations where they let down operators like Consortiq, and they let down your, Consortiq's customers too. You can't get up close to things because the magnetometer freaks out, or you lose GPS, or these things just crash. Right? It's really hard to fly these drones, especially when you're navigating around these complex structures and you might be kind of far off. You really want a drone with full and trustworthy obstacle avoidance, where anybody who's flown a Skydio will tell you it just feels so much different when you fly a Skydio versus when you fly something else. And 3D scan, a lot of people think that it's another version of the scripted flight out there, right? Where you might be designing a 2D grid pattern in GPS right over the top. There are some fantastic programs out there like Drone Deploy and Pix4D that let you do that, where you're gonna fly that lawnmower, that grid pattern, and try to stitch all those pictures together and generate a nice 3D model. Now the challenge is you're taking all those pictures from a 2D plane and you're trying to capture a 3D scene. Right? You're bringing a knife to a gunfight. What Skydio 3D scan does is get down and dirty in that scene. And so when you set up for a 3D scan, it's so easy. It's almost boring. I'll bring a book if I'm going out with a few friends to do some scanning on the weekend. And what you'll see is the drone will go up in the air. You'll just fly around what you're trying to scan, and you define a scan volume. You set a floor, a ceiling, and you drop pillars around so that you've got that volume that you want the drone to generate imagery of. Then you hit explore, and the drone is autonomously going to fly around that scene and generate itself a 3D model that it's going to use to think about during the flight. All of this happens in a matter of seconds, right? Your explore phase lasts for maybe 30 seconds as the drone flies around the scene to get a few different angles for itself. And then it's going to say, all right, pilot, I can see what the scene looks like. Everything looks great. Tell me what kind of data you want me to get. And so the pilot is going to say, well, I'd like this standoff distance, right? I would like this ground sample distance, which is correlated to that standoff distance. I would like my photos to overlap at this percentage. And then you can specify your camera. Do you want HDR on or off, right? And you're setting that photo overlap based on your use case. If you want to build a 3D model, that's your thing. You probably want 80% overlap or so. You're going to take a lot of photos. Or if you just want to make sure that you have pictures of every single square inch of whatever you're looking at, then you can just pick a lower overlap, like 30%. And you'll make sure that you have redundancy. Now, here's where it gets amazing. Skydio is going to go and plan an adaptive route based on your settings that hugs every contour, right? So you might be a meter off of the surface of whatever you're looking at, right? If it's a cell tower or a bridge or a building facade, and it's going to take all those photos. If you have to change batteries, it's going to automatically restart the scan and pick up right where it left off. And when you land and you're finished, you're going to be able to log right into that drone, right where you're standing over Wi-Fi, and browse all of those pictures indexed against a 3D model. We call this our edge model viewer. And you'll be able to tap on any point in that course model and see the imagery come up on the side, where you'll see every image that includes, say, antenna 1 on your cell tower. Here are the 5 pictures that include that. So it's absolutely magical. If you're just trying to get a spot inspection done, or if you're trying to build a really nice 3D model, maybe you're going to go and do a reconstruction in Bentley context capture or something like that. It's absolutely magical stuff to watch. I've probably overtalked myself in this podcast. As you can tell, I get a little excited about it.
This episode is brought to you by Consortiq. At Consortiq, we believe that, with drones, there's always a better way to do things. We train to instill confidence in those at the controls. We consult to ensure safety and mission success. We serve to help organizations quickly and efficiently achieve what's most important to them. Find your better way today. Visit Consortiq.com for details. Probably going to get you a little more excited. So you talk about seeing it in real time. Let's talk about that sweet enterprise controller that came out with the new Skydio X2, because I'm blown away by it. I want you to send me one for free. So what's new with this controller? Why does it stand out so much?
This controller is the result of working with so many talented and really insightful pilots from every industry. We did close to 100 interviews with folks from the defense industry, with first responders, with enterprise pilots. And we ended up designing a controller that just gives you this magical autonomy experience. First of all, everything that you'd expect from a really high quality drone controller. Great build quality, great wireless range, really strong antennas, a clamshell cover to keep it safe if you're just going to chuck that controller in your pocket or into a backpack for a scene that you have to hike into. And a big one that we learned when we left California and flew in a bunch of colder environments is it's glove compatible. And so nice big buttons that you can work with. One of those features that a company that were less connected with its customers might miss. So we're really excited about the hardware. And then you get into the software of it. You've got that nice big screen that's absolutely designed for workflows like 3D scan, where you're not engaging with the joysticks and the buttons on a regular basis as you fly. You're using that screen to monitor, whether you're monitoring tracking as in real time, you watch that drone do its routes, or you're using one of our augmented reality views to get an even better sense of what has been covered, what hasn't been covered by imagery as you fly your scene, or you're looking at that edge model viewer. That big screen really matters. And then just again, like the X2, a controller that's a fully approved supply chain that you can use when you're trying to win government work or perform government work directly. That's one of those kind of table stakes, but really important factors for a lot of our pilots. So you're right to be excited about it. I love flying with that thing. I also wish Skydio would send me one just to play with on the weekends, but it's going to be amazing. I think our pilots are going to love it.
I think a question that a lot of us would have. So there's this company called DJI. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Who?
DJI led the drone industry for so long. And naturally, other companies saw their success and they copied a lot of that technology. Skydio took a major leap forward with autonomous sensors. The big question becomes, and what we all want to know is, I think we all want to know, what's next and how do you outdo yourself in the coming years to stay ahead of that competition?
Sure. And look, DJI, they're an amazing company, right? And they've built their empire on building really cheap, high quality manual products. And all of that development has been around hardware, right? How big a camera can we bolt on? Can we bolt on a few more sensors? Can we turn our Honda Civic into something nice to drive, like we talked about? And we just think with autonomy, you kind of break that linear cycle. You go from having these drones that every year you've got this little arms race where Autel, another Chinese competitor out there, will come out with a slightly better camera. So DJI holds their next release until they've got a better camera, right? And all that stuff is great, but the result is that it keeps pilots buying new drones that don't really change their lives. And when you look at autonomy, a couple of things before I come back to your question, right? We've talked about how much it changes the way that these drones get used. It changes the amount of money that our pilots make and bring home at the end of the day. It changes the amount of pilots who can get into this industry. When you think about next steps, 3D scan is a fantastic example of how you're going from basically this era of drones that are like flip phones, where every year Nokia or Motorola would add a little bit of battery life or a little bit of talk time or T9 texting, to an era of iPhones where you can go from, instead of adding these little incremental improvements, well, now all of a sudden we're going to automate this entire process and make it so that you can go from doing 10 jobs to 100 jobs a year. And these differences, it's a lot like having an app store or a smartphone that can run applications that really, really change business processes and the pilot experience. So we're not at all resting on our laurels. We're also hard at work developing Skydio Cloud, a nice, trusted, secure server online for all of those wider use cases. And when it comes to the competition, we welcome it, right? We really think that autonomy is the way forward. And if these other vendors are serious about growing the drone industry and really serving pilots, well, autonomy is so clearly the way that they're going to have to do it. We think it's going to be really hard for them to replicate what we have. Building software-based autonomy with computer vision and neural networks is really hard. It's a much different exercise from bolting on a few ultrasonic sensors to the side of a big airframe like the Phantom. It takes a lot of time, it takes incredible engineering talent, it takes great execution, and all of that are things that our founders and team have been working on for a decade, right? Going back to their time at MIT when they pioneered all autonomous flight. And so, we're excited. We feel good about our chances. We certainly don't take the competition lightly, and we've got a lot of respect for what they can do. But we do think that right now our products serve pilots better, and I anticipate that will continue for the foreseeable future.
So a big reason that you are here, obviously, to talk about the new UAS, but there's a big event coming up here on June 2nd at 9 a.m. Countdown to the Era of Autonomous Inspection. What's it all about, and who should register? How do you register?
Oh my goodness. Well, Ryan, you're asking me all the excited things. I'm going to have to go breathe into a brown paper bag after this. We are putting on the biggest event that we have ever put on. It's completely virtual. It's free to register. Anybody can go register at tinyurl.com/autonomous inspection. Or if you follow any of Skydio's social channels, there are plenty of links going out there. And I couldn't be more excited about this. We took our executive team down to the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. There are a couple interesting things here. The first is we brought our CEO, we brought our VP of customer success, we brought our VP of autonomy, right? The people who are most responsible for making sure that this works for customers. We're also very lucky to have Dean Miller, who runs the drone program down at Sutton Construction, who joined us in Alabama. And why Alabama? Well, it's at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, which is hallowed ground, right? It's the Vatican of American aerospace. And they've got a Saturn V rocket down there, which is the biggest rocket America or the world has ever sent to space. And so we're really excited for that to be an area that we'll be talking a lot more and making some exciting announcements about our latest breakthroughs in AI. You might have a sense of some of the themes of what we'll be talking about and the themes of the announcements from listening to this podcast so far. But we're just so excited for this event. It's really coming together nicely and it's going to be spectacular. So I really hope that anybody who has interest in drones, anybody who has ever done an enterprise job, or if you're not into drones and you just are responsible for an inspection program or a mapping program or a construction program, come check this out and see how these incredible technologies can really help you keep your team safe and have your team doing the best work that they've ever done.
Well, it's been great having you today, Guillaume. I have to say, and the listening audience out here, they can't see it, but last time I spoke with you to set up this interview, you had guitars behind you, and now we have a white wall. Where did the guitars go?
Oh, the guitars are still out there. I'm in my bedroom here, which is the Skydio San Francisco Enterprise Product Marketing office. I'm here for your sound quality. It's a little bit less fun, but there are a few drones in here if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, I have drones in here too, so I guess that makes us drone people. Thanks for doing this today, and make sure to check out the big event coming up. As I said, June 2nd, 9 a.m., Countdown to the Era of Autonomous Inspection by Skydio. It's an event you're not going to want to miss. It's free, so we can give out a discount code from Consortiq that works for us. Thank you for coming on the show, and look forward to getting this out.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm just so excited about the future here. We're going to have so much fun, and there will be so many new pilots for us to talk to soon. So thanks, Ryan.
And that's all for this episode of Unmanned Uncovered. Make sure to join us next time as we continue to navigate all of the innovation that the drone industry is providing. Thanks for listening, and take care.